The warning signs were visible. The I-beams were bent and curved. The columns were unbalanced. Several wire rope cables had already snapped. Workers on site could see it. Construction continued anyway. On January 31, 2024, the hangar under construction near Boise Airport in Idaho collapsed. 3 workers were killed. 9 others were injured. The U.S. Department of Labor investigated. Their conclusion: the contractor had shown, in their exact words, an appalling disregard of safety standards. This video is about what those warning signs were, why they were ignored, and what the OSHA investigation found. Because the pattern in this case is not unique to one site. It is happening on sites right now. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics census of fatal occupational injuries, construction and extraction workers experienced 1,032 fatalities in 2024. The most recent data available, released February 19, 2026. In 2024, a worker in the United States died from a work-related injury every 104 minutes. Falls, slips, and trips remained the leading cause of death in construction, accounting for 370 fatalities in construction and extraction occupations in 2024 alone. But structural collapse, the failure of a structure while workers are actively building it, is a distinct category of hazard. And the OSHA record shows that in many of these cases, the warning signs were there before the collapse happened. The Boise Airport hangar collapse is one of the most fully documented examples in recent OSHA history. Everything in this video comes directly from the OSHA investigation report and the U.S. Department of Labor news release, published July 29, 2024. The project was the construction of a privately owned steel-framed aircraft hangar near Boise Airport in Idaho. The hangar was being built for the Jackson Jet Center. It was a large-scale engineered steel structure, 43 feet tall, covering 39,000 square feet, a football field-sized building. The contractor was Big D Builders Incorporated, based in Meridian, Idaho. They were a design-build contractor, meaning they were responsible for both the engineering design and the physical construction of the structure. According to OSHA investigators, the problems began before the first warning sign appeared. Big D Builders had started erecting the hangar without using sufficient bracing or tensioned guy wires. Guy wires are the tensioned cables used in large steel frame construction to hold structural bays in position and prevent the frame from twisting or tipping during erection. They are a standard requirement in steel construction of this scale. They were not installed as required. As construction progressed, the warning signs became visible. OSHA documented several of them specifically. The structural I-beams were curved, bent, and wavy, visible deformation in the primary load-bearing elements of the frame. The columns were unbalanced. Several wire rope cables had snapped. The bays of the building were visibly not straight. Federal inspectors, when they later examined the site, found that critical connecting bolts had been left loose throughout the structure. Rather than stopping work and addressing these conditions, Big D Builders continued adding 150-foot-long structural bays to the project. OSHA also found that instead of installing the required additional bracing or temporary guy lines, which is what steel erection industry standards require when visible structural problems are identified, the contractor used straps to try to straighten the additional spans. Straps on a structure showing multiple signs of instability. OSHA further found that the contractor failed to train workers to properly construct the steel spans, and the investigation found that cranes and other heavy construction equipment were allowed to operate in mud and standing water at the site, adding dynamic load and ground instability to a structure already showing deformation. On January 31, 2024, the hangar collapsed. Craig Durant, 59, co-founder of Big D Builders, was at the site. He was killed. Mario Santetsi, 32, a construction worker from Nampa, Idaho, was killed. Mariano Alex Koch-Ok, 24, a construction worker also from Nampa, Idaho, was killed. 9 other workers were injured. OSHA conducted a 6-month investigation. Their findings were published on July 29, 2024. Big D Builders was cited for 1 willful violation and 3 serious violations of federal safety regulations. A willful violation, under OSHA standards, means the employer either knowingly failed to comply with a legal requirement or acted with plain indifference to worker safety. It is the most serious classification OSHA issues. OSHA proposed $198,586 in penalties. OSHA Area Director David Kearns stated in the official release, Big D Builders' blatant disregard for federal safety regulations cost 3 workers their lives and caused at least 8 others to suffer painful injuries. He added, the tragic loss and pain suffered by so many is compounded by the fact that Big D Builders could have prevented all of this from happening. Now, what does this case teach us that applies to your site? OSHA research consistently identifies the same failure pattern across structural collapse investigations. The physical warning signs appear first. They are visible to workers, supervisors, and in many cases to anyone who looks at the structure. The failure to act is not always about not seeing the problem. It is about what happens after the problem is seen. In the Boise case, the warning signs were not subtle. Bent I-beams, snapped cables, visibly unstraight bays, loose bolts. These are not minor defects. They are engineering failures visible to the naked eye. The investigation found the company continued to add structural bays despite these conditions. The loading on an already compromised frame increased. The collapse was the result. OSHA identifies 4 failure patterns that appear across structural collapse investigations. These patterns explain why visible problems do not always result in stopped work. Pattern 1. Inadequate temporary works design. Steel erection requires temporary bracing and guy wires during construction before the frame becomes self-supporting. When this is skipped or underspecified to save time or cost, the structure is vulnerable throughout the erection phase. Pattern 2. Production pressure overriding structural judgment. On large commercial projects, schedule is financial. Stopping work for structural assessment delays delivery. The decision to continue despite visible warning signs is often made by someone focused on schedule, not on the condition of the frame. Pattern 3. Competent person not empowered to stop work. OSHA regulations require a competent person to be present during steel erection, someone who can identify hazardous conditions. But identifying a hazard and being empowered to stop work are 2 different things. When the competent person cannot issue a stop work order without approval from above, the protection that OSHA requires exists on paper but not in practice. Pattern 4. Using workarounds instead of corrections. In the Boise case, OSHA found that the contractor used straps to try to straighten structural spans instead of installing required bracing. A workaround treats the symptom. It does not address the load distribution problem, the missing guy wires, or the structural deformation that made the workaround necessary. If you work in construction, as a worker, a supervisor, or a safety officer, these 4 patterns are what you are watching for, not after a collapse, before one. Now, before you move on, we do the 3-step safety check. Every video on this channel ends here, because information without action is useless. Go through that list of hazards in your mind right now. Which of those exist at your site right now? Not which ones could exist. Which ones do exist, today? Be honest, because the workers around you need you to be honest. For each hazard you identified, who owns the fix? In most jurisdictions, the employer or principal contractor is legally responsible for ensuring the site is safe. But supervisors have a duty to report, and workers have a right to refuse work they genuinely believe is unsafe. Know which category applies to you, and know what your rights are in your country. Do not wait for someone else to fix a hazard you can see right now. If you are a supervisor or safety officer, document the hazard today. Issue a corrective action, set a deadline, follow up. If you are a worker, report the hazard to your supervisor in writing. Even a text message creates a record. If the hazard is immediate and serious, stop work. If you get no response, in the USA, file a complaint at OSHA.gov. In the UK, at hse.gov.uk. In Canada, at your provincial safety authority. In Australia, at safeworkaustralia.gov.au. Every one of those reporting systems allows anonymous reporting. Use them. 3 workers went to a construction site in Boise, Idaho on January 31st, 2024. They did not go home. The warning signs were there. The investigation confirmed it. The citations confirmed it. This channel exists so that the warning signs on your site do not end up as evidence in the next OSHA report. Subscribe so you do not miss the next video. Every video on this channel ends with the 3-step safety check. Because the goal is not views. The goal is that you go home. This is Construction Safety Decoded.